Beware the Fish by Gordon Korman. Attention World. It was 4 o'clock in the morning when Bruno and Boots were awakened by a frantic scratching at the window. The two boys rushed over and pulled Elmer in. He was a sight to behold. His face was shiny with perspiration, and his usually neat crew cut was standing on end. He was twitching nervously, and his eyes were wild. He looked like a hunted animal. "Where have you been?" stormed Bruno. "We've been worried sick." His shaky knees collapsing under him, Elmer sat down on the floor to tell his tale of woe. "It was horrible," he croaked. "After those two girls saved me from Miss Scrimmage, they wouldn't let me leave. They made me hide under the bed. When Miss Scrimmage came in and sat down on the bed, I was terrified." Bruno and Boots could bear it no longer. They burst into uncontrollable laughter. Elmer was outraged. "It's not amusing. And besides, they told Miss Scrimmage the most horrid lies about you. They said you were terrorizing them until she came along and saved them." By this time, Bruno and Boots had collapsed to the floor in hysterics. Then I had to stay there for 3 hours before that Kathy person would let me leave," Elmer continued. "It was the most harrowing experience of my life." "No more, Elmer," Bruno gasped, exhausted. "I can't stand it." Boots caught his breath. "Not bad for a first time out, Elmer. I'm nominating you for Rookie of the Year." "It's all very well for you to laugh," protested Elmer reproachfully. "You didn't have to go through what I did." "Ha," said Boots. "Old Scrimmage marched us to the fish at gunpoint, and he almost had a fit. We've got to see him in the office at 8 o'clock. We're cooked." Elmer turned even paler. Does Mr. Scrimmage know about me?" "No, he doesn't," said Boots. "You're clean." Elmer sighed with relief and turned to Bruno. "You told me you never got caught," he accused. "Miss Scrimmage caught you." Bruno shrugged. "That's a 1 in a million chance," he said. "Even a pro like me can have an off night. There's no way it could ever happen again. She got lucky." "Lucky or not," Boots said mournfully, "we're the ones who are going to have to face the music." "William, what are you going to do to those poor boys?" Mr. Sturgeon sipped his breakfast coffee. "I don't know, Mildred," he replied. "I am still headmaster here, and roaming the countryside in the dead of night is frowned upon by this institution." "But they were hungry," his wife pleaded. "They aren't getting enough to eat." "They are getting enough to eat," he snapped back. "They just aren't eating it." He shook his head. "I should be furious with them, but somehow I just feel angry at that awful Scrimmage woman. Every time I think of her being allowed to own that shotgun. If she ever hurts one of my boys, I'll—" "William, you're shouting again." At precisely 8 a.m., Bruno and Boots marched past the heavy oak door with Headmaster lettered in gold and into the office. They ignored the comfortable chairs intended for visitors and automatically sat on the hard wooden bench facing Mr. Sturgeon's desk. The headmaster leaned forward, fixing them with the cold, fish-like stare, which made his nickname all the more appropriate. "Lights out at McDonald Hall occurs at exactly 10 o'clock, he said icily. "From that moment on, all students are expected to be in their beds. Miss Scrimmage's finishing school for young ladies is off limits at all times, especially in the middle of the night. Are those rules something new to you?" "No, sir," Bruno admitted quietly. "I'm very happy to hear that," said Mr. Sturgeon. "I never want to catch you over there again. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," chorused Bruno and Boots. "Excellent," said Mr. Sturgeon. "At least I'm glad to see you didn't involve Grimsdale in your nonsense. As for your punishment, except for meal times, you are to spend the rest of today in your room." He stood up. "Dismissed." "Thank you, sir." The boys headed out of the office and scurried down the marble corridor of the faculty building. Once outside, Boots let his breath out in a long sigh of relief. "A day's punishment," he said incredulously. "I thought he was going to murder us." "I knew he'd go easy," replied Bruno. "He doesn't like Miss Scrimmage anyway. He was so mad at her, he forgot he was mad at us. It's very simple. It's all very simple. Anyway, we need a quiet day in our room." "You bet," said Boots enthusiastically. "I could use a nap. I hardly slept at all last night." "Who said anything about sleep?" demanded Bruno. "Our suggestion box must be full by now. We have to get to work." "Swell," said Boots without enthusiasm. "We could have started getting publicity for the hall last night if we'd thought of it. Picture this, students shot by crazed headmistress. Wouldn't that have enlarged our enrollment?" "Don't be an idiot," scoffed Bruno. "This is an important thing we're doing. If everyone takes us as lightly as you do and McDonald Hall closes, then where will we be? The two boys headed for Dormitory 2 to serve their punishment and read the suggestions. I don't care about the budget, snapped Mr. Sturgeon into the telephone. My boys must have their evening snack because they're young and healthy and they're growing, that's why. They're also begging food over at scrimmages, and I'll not have that. We may be in financial difficulty, but surely we have some pride. Yes, a little cereal and milk would be fine. I'm glad you agree, Jim. Thank you. Goodbye. He replaced the receiver with a look of satisfaction on his face. It had taken Bruno Walton and Melvin O'Neill to get him back into harness, but at least now he was fighting back. In room 201, the Pacific Salmon smiled down on industrious activity. Elmer Grimsdale's head was buried deep inside the black box containing his video invention. He was tinkering happily while humming a Bach fugue. Bruno and Boots sat cross-legged on the floor. Between them was Boots's duffel bag, filled to overflowing with small pieces of paper. Here's something, said Boots. Let them close the place so we can all go home and get a square meal. It's signed Anonymous. You know, I'm a little disappointed in all this, said Bruno. A lot of the guys don't seem to have understood what we wanted. Look at these suggestions. Rob a bank. Get caught and get your name in the paper. Commit a murder. Same notation. What's the matter with these idiots? Boots laughed. Here's one from Sidney Rampolsky. It says, discover gold on the campus. Ha, said Bruno. I wish we could. Here's two more. Rob a bank. For goodness sake, he shuffled through several others. Hey, now here's something. Marvin Trimble says we should fake an ancient Indian burial ground. Then the government will declare the site a national monument and they'll never allow anything to be built here, so the school will stay. Bruno, are you crazy? Boots exclaimed. We can't do that. Where would we get ancient relics? An arrow is an arrow, shrugged Bruno. Not when it's plastic and says made in Japan. So we'll make a few in shop, agreed Bruno. And we'll stomp on them a bit so they'll look old. They won't be ancient enough, insisted Boots. Those archaeologist guys have a way of finding out how old things like that are. They're not just going to take a quick look and say, great heavens, arrows, and then put up a national monument. They're going to check to see if the stuff is real, which it won't be, and then we'll be in trouble again. I guess you're right, considered Bruno. What a stupid guy that Marvin Trimble is. Do you see anything else in this mess? Boots nodded. Rob Adams says someone should make a great discovery, like a cure for a terrible disease, just like that. That's Elmer's department, laughed Bruno. Hey, Elm, as soon as you're finished with that TV thing, would you mind discovering a cure for some dread disease? Elmer's head emerged from the black box. Oh, he said seriously, as a matter of fact, I'm working on a cure for the common cold right now. I thought you were working on that broadcasting thing, said Boots. I am, replied Elmer. I am currently involved in 17 different projects. Or is it 18? I don't remember. His head disappeared again. Boots cast Bruno a look of pure wonder. Does he ever finish anything? Is he ever successful? Bruno shrugged. I don't know. At last, cried Elmer. It's completed. He leaped to his feet and gazed earnestly at Bruno and Boots. Would you mind helping me set it up to test it? Sure, said Bruno. He and Boots picked themselves up off the floor and watched in amazement as Elmer began gathering equipment from every corner of the room, under the beds and in the closet. They spent the next hour fetching, carrying, and holding electronic gear for the eccentric genius as he set up his new invention. When it was all done, several yards of wire and cable snaked across the walls and under the furniture to Elmer's black box. On top of the black box sat an enormous jumble of circuits, tubes, and resistors, and a condenser microphone, all attached to a camera turret that was a full yard long. The lens was pointed directly at Elmer's Pacific Salmon poster. On the back of the black box was a small television screen and a speaker. Bruno and Boots were awed. Wow, said Boots. I didn't think a mere mortal could make such a thing. Wow, echoed Bruno. Even if it doesn't work, Elm, it's a thing of beauty. Now what happens? We try it out, of course, replied Elmer. If my computations were correct, my salmon should appear on the screen, and whatever we say will come out of the adjacent speaker. He reached for the on switch. Isn't this movie exciting, William? Said Mrs. Sturgeon. I don't know when I've enjoyed an afternoon of television more. How do you think it's going to turn out? We'll know soon enough, Mildred, Mr. Sturgeon replied, glancing at his wristwatch. The picture ends in 5 minutes, so the climax must be coming up soon. The couple watched the action intently. Suddenly there was a buzz of static and the screen went momentarily blank. The Sunday matinee was replaced by the fuzzy image of a large fish, dead center on the screen. It wavered once, then stabilized. The audio crackled into what sounded like distant cheering, and a garbled voice cried, "Attention world, we bring you the fish." This was followed by what sounded like laughter. "William, what in the world?" Her husband frowned. "A fish. This is very strange indeed." "But what is it?" she insisted. Both stared in perplexed fascination for some time until at last the image of the mysterious fish faded out. It was replaced by the Sunday matinee just as the words "the end" appeared on screen. "William, our movie is over." Mr. Sturgeon stared at the television screen. "Attention world," he mused. "We bring you the fish." "Hot gadzoobies, Elmer, it works!" screamed Bruno ecstatically, jumping up and down in the little space that was left in the room. "It's fantastic!" cried Boots. Yes, agreed Elmer, flushed with pleasure. "It would appear that I am on the right track." "Hey, I know!" exclaimed Bruno. "We can use this thing to show up on people's TV sets and tell them how great McDonald Hall is and how they should send all their sons here." No, Elmer smiled indulgently. "There's a problem in the equations. It's a new theory in circuitry, a curious contradiction, you might say. This is a preliminary experimental model. It will only broadcast to a screen and speaker on my black box. I might be able to work it out for what you want in a few more months," he added eagerly. But, unaware of Elmer's contradictory equations, all the television viewers within a 25-mile radius of McDonald Hall were wondering why the fish had invaded their homes. And that's the end of that chapter.